Okay. So we're back to dealing with this tzarat, trying to get a little bit of a grip on what the inner spirituality of it is. And we went actually the past two times. We made some forays into the note, the inner dimensions on 86th on the right. And I want to breeze through some of it because we've been over it a few times, just to give us a little bit more, refresh our memories, and we'll see if we can, dive into it more. It says, although tzarat does not result from any natural physiological condition, when divine providence decrees that this condition appear in a person, the resulting lesion is produced by limiting the circulation of blood in the area, which then turns white. So physiologically, obviously, there's a circulation issue. There can be a whitening of the skin. So this is what shows up in a lesion, where there's some type of a spiritual circulation issue. This obstruction is in turn the physical manifestation of, if it's corresponding spiritual antecedent, the obstruction of the flow of divine consciousness from Chachma to Bina. We spoke about a little bit about Chachma to Bina. I want to delve in to that today, but there's a Chachma deficiency. It's not a vitamin D deficiency, it's a Chachma deficiency into our Bina. Because we each have a Chachma, we each have a Bina. And then he goes, this is kind of parenthetical. This is a little bit about the fact that one of the names of God associated with Bina, and we'll get into Bina in a second, is Eke, the word and the way of self-referencing that Hashem used in talking to Moses at the burning bush, said, I will be what I will be. And that means it says that's what they put here is Eke, and the numerical value of the regressive iteration of this name is 44, which is the numerical value of the word for blood. And just like blood courses through and brings us life, as in the words of the Torah, and courses through our system, and it's so critical to the system because of that. So there is here Chachma is similar, and when there's a Chachma deficiency, there's a circulation deficiency. And the psychological equivalent of this blockage of Chacham Bina occurs when we contemplate, as we should, God's transcendence, how He manifests Himself in creation, but our heightened awareness of God's presence does not cause us to feel nullified followed within that presence. Okay, so now let's get there. They're nailing a very specific example of Chacham Bina, and for good reason, because that's the one that's used in literature about it. But I want to try and expand this so we understand more our Chachma and our Bina and what this means. So, if you're, and just to call into mind also that what I did mention last week, that in the primary Torah, the primary translation of the Torah is an Aramaic translation of Onkelos, and here he translates this lesion as the language is segiro, the Hebrew word for soger or skor, which means to close. It's closed off. There's a closing off of the circulation, so to speak, of the flow of Chachma into our Bina. So let's share screen here. And first, let's go to this. So this is I got a different diagram on the way, because last week's, it was from Chabad.org. I think it was a little, for our purposes, was going to be a little misleading. So you'll notice here that there are actually 11 Sefirot, because in the Sefirot, in our general use of the Sefirot, and how we see it, it starts off from Chochmah. That's the first one, and then it progresses to Bina, Taz, then Chesed, Gevura, and then Tiferes, and then Netzach, Chod, Yesod, Malchus. It's split into three different poles, so to speak, because it reflect three different generally different approaches or rhythms within our personalities, and then there needs to be interplay in order for us to be a more a holistic and balanced human being. Within our personalities, there's going to be a tendency more towards, let's say, giving, and then the healthy balance of that is saying there's only so much I have to give, and therefore I have to balance it, or expressing love but not overwhelming it. So there, just to use simple examples of how there has to be inner balance. We're talking here now about Chochmah and Bina. So let's get to Chochmah for a second. Here, take a look. There's in verse 14. This is from Ecclesiastes. No, so which verse is it? It's 12. Okay. Whoever is in the shade of wisdom is the shade of money. A lot of this is more cryptic. I'm not going to. This isn't a study of Ecclesiastes. What I want to go is to the final words of it. It says, "Wisdom gives life to its possessor." That wisdom enlivens us. Okay, so which is nice. Wisdom is a good thing, and it gives us life, whatever that means. And a lot of things are important for life, but really, it seems to be positioning the idea of wisdom. And again, wisdom is an English word, which means, but there are a lot of different words that can be for cognitive awareness or understanding. But wisdom it's a Hebrew word, chokhmah, which is very specific. This chokhmah function, which we're calling wisdom at the moment, that gives life to its possessor. That being the case, so then we say chokhmah is something which, like we said, it's in the blood flow. We have different functions of our body, but blood flow is essential to the life of everything else. And chokhmah is like the blood flow through all of our other various functions, giving life to it. Now, what is the life that it gives? The life that it gives, in short, is a sense of reverence, a sense of our mission, to our surrender to God, our need for God, our mission, our divine mission, and therefore it's the infusion of a sense of responsibility to something higher than ourselves. Even as we're feeling a certain way, it's tempering with some humility. But that's just in a nutshell. But I want to get into the Chochmah and Bina dynamic, and then we can expand it a little more, because that's what we're talking about, Chochmah and Bina. In the normal unfolding, and Kesder is our deepest desires and so on. It's not one of the 10 functionals, it's subconscious. I think we discussed that last week. And here we're talking about Kesder, which means a crown. It peaks first into Chochmah and then develops into Bina. Chochmah is called, in Kabbalistic language, it's called father. Bina is the mother. Chochmah gives the germ of awareness, and Bina develops it. And together they create the children, or the emotions and how we feel, because how we frame, how we think about something guides how we feel about something. So in the unfolding of our personality and our approach to the world, in a healthy way, it's not that how we feel about it and then we rationalize how we feel, but we want to be able to have a visionary, calm perspective, and based on how we see something in a more pristine, cognitive, settled way, that will guide our feelings. So the classic example of a Chochmah and Bina dynamic, discussed it over the years, and I think last week also. Chochmah would be it's the language is that there's it's language is like a lightning bolt, which means like you're like the eureka. I have an idea. So Matt, if we're sitting together now on the phone trying to figure out how it's possible to reconcile one reality with the fact that we also want to be able to go and create a wonderful Purim for residents of the Somerset Hills. So then we could say, this is a value. We have a very real obstacle. It seems to be negating our goal and the thinking. And then all of a sudden, one of you says, I have an idea. So there's a germ of an idea. The germ of an idea. Now, if there was something, if a common human instinct is to say, no, shh, I have an idea. Why do we say, shh, I have an idea? Because we really don't have it yet. There's a glimmer of an idea, but I haven't developed it yet. So again, just 1 second, I got to think this through. And in Yiddish, we say it's how the idea grabs a person. The idea overwhelms us. We are now a recipient of an idea from our deeper subconscious, because we didn't have the idea 20 seconds ago, and now it came. Where did it come from? It came from our deeper subconscious, and now it's hitting us, but we don't really have it. It's hitting us, and we don't have our arms around it. Bina is where not the idea grabs the person, but where the person grabs the idea. It's not to dissect and say, 1 second, is this going to make work? It's going to make sense? Can it work? This angle, that angle, we unpack it, we massage it, we refine it, and then we come up with an idea that works. We have an idea that works. Everybody can make all the noise they want. It's an idea. It's in my head, and my memory is okay. So I'm going to remember it because I own the idea. Chachma is more being in recipient mode and of a germ, and it has to be developed. Now, that's all accurate. Think about in this way also, though, that in Chochmah, because we're in recipient mode, and we're really in a much more, we're in a humbled place. We're just waiting to receive, and we want this idea to unpack in our heads. Bina, we're in more aggressive mode. We're unpacking, we're owning, we're dissecting, we're asking, we're pushing and pulling, and it's our ideas, which those are all important. That's not a measure of any one being more moral than the next, but they're important functions, all very important functions within us.
Excuse me,
Yes.
pardon me. Lori is trying to get in, but apparently it's locked. So new people can't get in.
So let me check that out. Why would that be? I'm sorry. Oops.
Yeah, she's been
right. Accidentally, it was locked. I apologize. Okay.
okay. I'm gonna let her know. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Sorry. No. Thank you for telling. Let's see if there's anything else. There's Lori. Hey, Lori. Good to see you. Sorry. Okay. Okay. So those Chochmah Bina dynamics, that's the way it plays out for us. But if you want to look at it a little deeper, in Chochmah mode, in Bina mode, just by definition, there's a sense of self. It's what we understand and what comes to us with this specific thinking. Now, let's think about this a little bit of a different angle. What if I'm praying today, and I think about the needs of people who don't have enough food, and how I need to be compassionate to them. And this is what takes me over. And I've thought it through, and I'm exercising my bina. I'm contemplating on it, and I'm feeling it, and it takes really it takes over my psyche, because it's very meaningful to me. It's all good stuff. So by definition, when I am engaged in bina, there's only so many places I can put my mind and my heart. So I have a narrower scope of where I'm focusing. Today happens to be on the needs of the hungry, the underfed. Israel has an Israel advocacy is a value. Jewish literacy is a value in my own country. There's a lot of good things to do. I can't focus on them all at one moment. So right now, today, I happen to be thinking about the underfed, if we can call it that. That's called normal life. At the same time, what Torah would tell me is that sometimes because I get so swept up, and I'm just picking an example, the underfed, that becomes my focus. If it's now it's about my focus and where my emphasis is. So maybe if someone comes along to me after I finish my prayer or my meditation session or my moments of contemplation where I'm just thinking about my day ahead, and they point out something that I can do today to help Israel advocacy, or help a disabled neighbor, or help Jewish literacy. If where my inspiration and my engagement is today, at this moment, is right now, I'm living in food needs and food scarcity, it's hard to pivot. And I'm going to make a note of that. I want to deal with this later or tomorrow, but right now it's a good thing dealing with the food needs and the underfed, and therefore that's taking up the space in my head. I'm just giving you kind of a primitive example. Now, what if, in truth, from a purely rational, objective perspective, the need that came across to me of the Israel advocacy is actually more pressing, more direct, more personal, needs my involvement than the food need that I was going to pursue today. And I could, obviously, food needs are food needs also. All of them are important needs. Either I can get someone else to do that, or I could deal with it later. But just from a perspective of, because we have to sometimes balance between good and good needs and good needs, right? So we can't be everywhere at the same time. And one of the things is can someone else do this instead of you? Or how much is there a pressing need right now from someone else who needs me, or any of us? So there is this idea, and that in my prayers, I'm using prayers just as an example, but it's in this time of me thinking about who I am, and who I want to be, and who I need to be. Bina is critical, because that's how something comes alive to me. I flesh it out, I think about it, and I feel it. But it's limiting, because I'm limited, and this is about me and what I want to do. The idea of tasting, even after the Bina, tasting the surrender that comes with Chochmah. We say with Chochmah, it's just that we're more in recipient mode, and allowing ourselves to be open to ideas would allow me to maybe to come down to earth a little bit and say, okay, yeah, I'm really flying high with this idea of what I'm going to do, to go to the food kitchen, whatever I'm doing, but what am I needed for today? And if I think about myself in terms of what am I needed for today, and it's an open field, there could be more options, and maybe in the scope of balancing the options, I might come out on the end of saying that my priority today is go to a food kitchen, but I might not. But first, I have to get out of me, to get out of this is I'm swept up in my thoughts, my processing, my feelings. But that's Bina, and it's outgrowths. Chochmah is the surrender. It's not just about my feelings, even good feelings. It's about tempering, to see that my responsibility. It's not about what I want to do. It's about my responsibility to God and to my own life and to those around me, obviously. So, if you want to reframe then what they wrote here in the second paragraph, this is the psychological equivalent of this blockage occurs when we contemplate as we should God's transcendence and how he manifests himself in creation. But our heightened awareness of God's presence does not cause us to feel nullified within that presence. They're trying to say here that we have bina without chacham. The idea is that I'm really excited. I'm thinking, I studied, I feel that God, the infinite, the idea of an infinite who cares about us and created a world and cares about me and my world, and how do I touch an infinite? I want to connect with the infinite. That's all really good stuff. But I want to connect with the infinite. I also want to go on vacation to Acapulco. I mean, there are things I want. Here, the idea is that's bina without the centering and the gravitas of a chachma. It's not only what I want, the fact that I'm feeling surrender to that presence. And to continue this, and then we'll go further with stuff. It says, when this self-nullification is lacking, our enhanced awareness of God can actually inflate our ego even further. Just because a person has deep understanding of God doesn't mean that they're a humble person. On the contrary, now they're a person, they have a reason to be self-important in contradistinction to someone else next to them, because they know a lot about God, instead of nullifying it as it should. In the words of the sages, if the student merits the study of the Torah, acts for him or her as an elixir of life. If he does not, it acts as an elixir of death, which is obviously a harsh word. The word for merit, zaka, zocha, also means to be refined, which would be zaka, intimating that the merit that determines whether the study of the Torah betters and debilitates the student is his degree of spiritual refinement, and the refinement is lack of ego. So there's a certain idea, and again, I need to feedback from you and you if this is not making sense to you, or if I'm not fleshing it out enough. But there is an idea in Jewish spiritual thought and Kabbalistic thought, Hasidic thought, which is a very important part of this equation. This is from Ezekiel, and Ezekiel opens up with a very funky vision of a divine chariot and angels, and it's very hard to decipher. But he does see angels, and they're called, the Hebrew word that he uses for it is chayot. Chayot can mean, in today's Hebrew, it can mean wild animals. Chayot means technically living beings. Here he's referring to angels. And it says that they would run and return, like the appearance of sparks. What is run and return? The language, and I don't, they have an amazingly difficult job in translation of this piece in Ezekiel because it's just so funky. But rotzoi means to run. Rotzoi also means to lunge, and rotzoi means like and it's from the word from ratzon, to desire. So if in our own lives, say we have something which inspires us, we want to do it, we get excited about it, we're focused on it, we're hyper focused on it, that's rotzoi. Shuv means settling down, returning. Rotzoi is I want God. I want to be totally connected with holiness. I want to be whatever. Just we are reaching and lunging for something, whether physically or spiritually, emotionally. And shuv, the other one, the Hebrew one, is a shuv, which is returning, means settling down and saying, okay, but I have a life. What am I going to do with this? So prayer also has this idea of these twin dynamics. Actually, I'll bring back this. Of these twin dynamics, this of rotzoi and shov, the idea of that we come to moments of great inspiration, but moments of great inspiration also have to be tempered with a sense of her own responsibility and gravitas, that this isn't about what we find meaningful. So take that a little bit, and here we're going to get a little bit more to maybe to understand how this translates into Lashon Hara. What does this have to do with Lashon Hara? This is all holy stuff. What happens if, I spoke before about Israel advocacy. Let's say I'm really thinking about that and thinking about all the struggles that Israel goes through, and what's going on now with Iran, and I'm really excited about it, and I really want to do whatever I can, and I go online and I'm looking to be able to help with Israel advocacy in this country, because I'm not living in Israel, but I care about it as my land. I'm really excited. I see someone, a colleague, a friend, who has a different perspective. They belong to J Street, which is also officially an Israel advocacy group, but that I would consider, and I think a number of people would consider, much too pro-Palestinian for my tastes. Or a friend of mine who is, who believes in creating an understanding with Iran, so they can be able to get their centrifuges all the way up for a need that would give them nuclear weaponry. I'm excited now about Israel. It's within the realm of the imaginable. That my disdain, my disagreement, which could cross over into disdain. Disagreement is okay, disdain is not. Into how I'm speaking to this person, because I'm wrapped up in holiness. I'm wrapped up in Israel. And as far as I'm concerned, that's unholiness. So how I speak to them or how I speak about them doesn't feel so terrible, because I'm on a holy. I'm not going to use the word jihad, but I'm on a holy trek. That is, to use the terms of Ezekiel, that is the running. In other words, the lunging and the inspiration and really jumping for something without the gravitas of returning, of settling down and figuring out, thinking about what does God really want to be. And in this sense, it's bina without the temper of Chachma, without the calming of Chachma. Yeah, Chachma sees it's cognitive, but like there's the way it's described in Kabbalistic writings, the difference between Chachma and Bina is that Chachma is seeing, Bina is hearing. What's the difference between Chachma and Bina? Seeing and hearing. You hear, you process, and if you believe it, don't believe it, it's if someone tells you something went on outside, you process it, you ask your questions, you decide whether you want to accept it, reject it, whatever, but you're in control of the information and how much it resonates within you. What if you see something that makes no sense to you? You're seeing it. When you see something, what takes up the space is what's being shown to you. Who cares what you understand? It's not up for that. It's there. It's real. So envisioning, even seeing something in our mind's eye, and there are things that we may not be able to explain, but we feel there's a truth to them. We know there's a truth to them, but it's a little bit beyond poor for words. Bina is being an idea, but it's broken down into words, even in our minds. It's broken down into definition. Defining in our minds is more subtle than defining it to each other, but it's already starting to get defined. Chachma is you see it, and you know it's there. It's like a faith thing, but it's something that you're in receiver mode. It's being shown to you, and whether or not you understand it is not the point here. So Bina is very much more again about it's a very critical function and a critical function for holiness and a holy life, but it does represent us as being us. And Chachma represents the idea of sitting back and saying, it's us, it's me, but what am I being shown? What am I needed for? It's a tempering. And therefore, the idea of having a Bina type excitement about an issue without the sobering humility of Chachma means that even a good thing can go off the rails. It happens. Now, let's take this a little bit more. This amplified sense of self, on 87, intoxicates us with overconfidence. Again, he's going back now to this idea, the example of it. We sat and we thought before prayer, we're thinking about the majesty of godliness and majesty of the world. We're all excited, but our own sense of surrender to God is not part of that. We feel great. We love God, and we love the fact that we can understand God to the extent we can. This amplified sense of self intoxicates us with overconfidence, which, unless checked, can corrupt us in many ways. It could delude us into thinking we can safely lower our guard against the enticements of materialism. It could render us overly judgmental of others, hence the increased propensity towards gossip or slander. It can exaggerate our self-estimation. And where we can come out of this is leading us to depression. We fail to live up to our unrealistic expectations for ourselves, and so on. Whatever the case, the forces of evil siphon off divine energy from this unbalanced Bina. Okay, so that's Bina without Chachma. Now, I want to take this into a bit of a different track of what's going on in all of this, because remember, all of this is coming. It's God's divine building blocks of reality, the divine function of reality, and that's reflected within our own souls. All this is within God and within us. Within all of this is all godliness, is holiness. Now, where does selfishness come in? Where does self come in? And where does all the obnoxiousness that comes in with selfishness? It really has no place here. This is God's crown, the awareness, this is all within holiness. So within holiness, say that God has gives for the sake of our reality, gives us the ability for sense of self, ego, because ego isn't necessarily bad. I have to have a sense of self in order for me to push against negative forces within society, within myself. But it can get overblown and fall out of proper focus, and then things go awry. But what we say is that there's a very narrow place given for sense of self. That there's me, and then there's God. I have to have that. God doesn't want us to feel be like angels, where we feel totally surrendered to God. He wants us to feel as individuals with our own social security number, our own needs, and then make space for God. But within a divine, holy universe, that's given in a small slivers, and the language of Kabbalah is like hairs, just like a hair is, and we did touch on it last week. A hair is part of the life of the body, right? Because it grows, but it's really kind of detached from us because it grows, and my nails too, but it doesn't hurt when I clip them off, which means that they are part of my living body, and a corpse doesn't grow hair or nails. But the fact is that there's a certain detachment of that life. And so God gives us, within the normal holy paradigm, this idea, what they're going to call attenuated divine life, because everything needs a divine life. Everything in the world needs the sustenance from the divine, because the only true existence is God. So therefore, God gives narrow bands of existence to the sense of self that's necessary for us to have human life. What happens when I use my soul today, my holy soul, and I do something wrong, and so I invest myself in, let's say, in Lashon Hara. What I've done now is I've taken my soul and my godliness and my where there's a fuller flow of holiness, and I've invested it in negativity. I spoke negatively about someone. I'm giving more flow to the self of the world, the non-godly element of the world, more than it deserves and more than it needs. I'm feeding negativity. So if we look at sense of self, which isn't bad, but sense of bloated self and sense of self as it crosses over into selfishness, and even therefore cross over into evil, that is, you see that as an organic existence that has basic, minimal sustenance from God, just so that it exists as a concept and as a potential for us to tap into, so that we have a meaningful life. And when we feed it, we're feeding the negativity of the world. Our own negativity, we're feeding the negativity of the world. And the image, as I say, is often the hair coming. So one of the things we spoke about last week and mentioned is that the impurity of this lesion is that it's white, which means there isn't the circulation of the chokhmah, which is like the blood that should keep us in properly alive, meaning connected to God and surrendered to God. But then there's a hair coming out. If there was a hair coming out of that part of the body before there was a lesion, so what? Of course, we have hair. And hair isn't necessarily bad. God created the world with hair. God created the world where there's a normal flow, minimal, normal flow of divine sustenance to the sense of self. But when it grew out of the lesion, first there's the lesion. So now we have the sense of self, bina, that's not being informed, and balanced by chokhmah, and now it grows a hair. That's unhealthy flow. It's coming out of too much sense of self, and that's what would be considered a lesion. That's truly a lesion. You take a look over here. This added opportunity for the forces of evil to insinuate themselves into our lives is reflected physically in the growth of white hair within the lesion. As we will see later, hair represents a highly attenuated flow of divine energy. So attenuated, the forces of evil allow it to tap it. What it means is that it's for basic existence. God allows it. That there be a world where there is such a concept of evil. Right? There would not be a concept of rape and murder. It would not exist if God hadn't created those concepts. But God wants that as a concept which could be done so that we have moral choice. But God doesn't want us to tap into it and feed it. Here we're saying that forces of evil are allowed to tap it because, in other words, they get their basic sustenance from it. For this reason, hair must normally be kept short in order to prevent the forces of evil from siphoning off more than the minimal divine energy that they are allocated for their continued existence. All we want, we know that until Mashiach comes, there will not be the total eradication of evil as a concept, but we want to keep it flat and unfed. So, and that's they don't get here into the difference between the hair prior to the lesion and post the lesion, but that's kind of what we spoke about. We referenced last week.
Is this just men or women too?
No, this is everybody.
But the hair, but it's just that hair, not all hair. They kept short.
There's, there is no halacha of women keeping hair short. But there is the idea that a woman's hair it has a special power to it. There definitely is found there, and that's why we're more careful about that. And there's the hair of the Nazarite. I mean, there are different things. The spiritually speaking, the laws about the Jewish laws about covering the hair are very much related to this. There's the idea of how physically how it looks, but then there's the idea of the spirituality of it.
And what about hair in a wig?
So hair in a wig technically it's not living hair. It doesn't have that impact. I guess anything in the world can be used for something that's not helpful and not holy, and hair in a wig can be done the same, but innately it doesn't have that issue.
So would hair in a wig from a non-Jew versus hair in a wig from a Jew have a different, if you will, spiritual value?
I don't believe so, any more than a sweater of a Jew and a sweater of a non-Jew would be different. Would my sweater be different than your sweater because we're different people and we impact our clothing? I think so. At a spiritual subatomic level, probably your clothing are going to have a certain quality that mine doesn't have because of what you do in those clothing. Same thing if you say about a wig to the people, but I don't think that there's anything inherently problematic with at all with a non-Jew's wig or buying a wig from a non-Jew. There was a problem, if that's what you're remembering or referencing. Years ago, there was the idea that some of the wigs came from India, from a place where the wigs, the hair had been used as part of they said had been used as part of a Hindu ritual. That's different.
No, I was sort of thinking that one's hair is disconnected from the body.
Yeah.
Does it retain any of those attributes? And that's the reason I was differentiating.
I can't say what it retains. I think that there's always residual stuff, but our concern here is not about in a wig. Our concern here is about within the hair that we have, which is really, it's our soul, our life is now expressing itself in outside the body in hair, and that's it reflects the idea of God's nourishment outside the divine body, so to speak, of the holy spectrum, and that's something that also we want to be careful about, because it, like I say, the Kohen had to be before the Kohen was I think we studied this already. Before the Kohen was inducted as a Kohen, to cut off all the hair. There's a certain the idea of the hair could grow back later, but the idea is of where the symbolism and the importance of the hair is in this idea of an attenuated life force that's coming out, and we're talking about the divine, holy life force.
Thank you.
Debbie, I don't know if we finished with what you had asked, but that's as far as I can understand it.
Okay, but that's also, there's a distinction between women and for kids, it's not relevant. It's really only as adults or married adults.
I think, for kids, we also have the idea of letting the hair grow up till 3. All of these things are all connected to the same idea. That's with boys. It generally under 13 and or 12 for a girl, there's much less of this type of resonance because they're just kids. The focus on the woman's hair is only after marriage, because she has a certain special sanctity in the relationship with her husband, and therefore there's more concern about the hair. Right? So to finish off this note, it says here that in order to restore the flow of Chachma to Bina, so if you think about it, we want to, the Kohen is going to come along and there is a Chachma deficiency. There isn't the flow from here to there. In other words, the humility and the surrender, and the gravitas we need isn't showing itself in our thinking, in our feelings, and our excitement. The individual must be presented to a Kohen who represents Chesed. The Kohen represents kindness, which is Chesed. So you have Chachma here, which is the humility, that sense of what we call wisdom, and in the same pole is Chesed. So the Kohen has a special relationship with that pole, with Chachma pole, which is derived from Chachma, both here being on the right axis. Axis is a better word than pole, sorry, of the Sephirah tree. The priest then quarantines him for 7 days in order to allow the 7 lower sub-spheres of Chachma to re-enter Bina. He's saying here is like this. Every one of these, Chachma, Bina, Das, each one of these is subdivided. Each one of the 10 Sephirot is subdivided into 10. So there's a Chachma of Chesed, there's a Bina of Chesed, there's a Das of Chesed, there's a Gvur of Chesed. And we go through some of those things, at least with 7 every year during the counting of the Omer, where we take these 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 3, 6. No, I'm sorry. These 3, 6, 7 from here down, the emotive attributes. We subdivide them into 7, and those are the 7 weeks, and every so it's 49 days, and each day it focuses on part of the interplay. Go through 7 parts of Chesed, 7 parts of Gvura, 7 parts of Tiferet. Here we're the same things with 10, that they're subdivided into 10. But the thing with the 7 is that the 7 is how one part of us, because we should function as something of a progressive chain. We frame in our minds something, we think about it, and then we feel. That's how we work. If it matters to us, then we thought about something, and it wasn't just I thought about something that's irrelevant to me. So if it's relevant to me, I'll turn the page. But if I think about it and it's relevant, and I've thought about it enough so that I make sure that it's relevant, then I start to feel. That's these 3. When I start to feel, I feel motivated to act, and then ultimately I act, which would be the Malchut. So these 7 are all how they are how a specific energy or rhythm within us is now motivated to move on. So if I have a feeling in Chesed, and my Chesed means I feel a desire for kindness. I feel like I really got to help that person. So the Chesed itself starts to infuse my action. First of all, hopefully it touches my Tiferet, which is my general, my gatekeeper of goals and objectives. Does this make sense for the general objective in life? And I temper it properly, not to with my gevura, not to overdo it in the chesed I'm going to do. Can I afford this? Can I afford the time? Can I afford the money? Whatever I'm planning on doing, and then I'm going to move forward in this. But the bottom 7, because chesed has, as I said, it's broken down into 10. The bottom 7 means its own chesed, gvura, tiferet, netzach, yesod. They push forward the chesed to the next stage. And then the next here, let's say the yesod, which is it pushes forward through its lower 7. In other words, there's an interface between the cause and effect. The cause has its where in its more lower dimensions, in its dimensions that are more reaching out, more connected with the effect. They invest themselves in the effect and therefore stimulate the effect. So in their language, they're saying the priest then quarantines them for 7 days in order to allow the 7 lower sub-sephirot of Chachma to re-enter Bina. For it is always the 7 lower sub-sephirot of the higher parts of means it's a Kabbalistic term for a unit. a bunch of different units. So this here we're talking about this is what we would call this whole the tree is called a parts of Chachma Bina Dat. They have their interplay of logic, intellect, and reasoning. That's its own parts of. The emotions, these 7 are their own parts of. It's always the 7 lower subspheres of a higher parts of that becomes vested within the lower parts of, imparting to it its inherent sense of self-nullification before God. So because the higher one has more of a sense of connectedness to the divine, and hopefully it can impart to the lower one that this isn't just about what I feel or what I'm excited about, but the idea of it's also my mission of what I'm going to do today and what's important to God. So this is, just trying to get a little bit of the Kabbalah of this, since they put it in here already. I wanted to try to unpack it as much as possible. The next Hasidic insight is pretty long, so I think we should just leave it in entirety for next time. Because just to start it without even a chance of finishing it, I don't know if that's where we want to go. Is there any questions?
Yeah, I was going to say,
Sure.
so it seems like Bina is like ego gone wrong, ego gone too far, and the opposite of, well, once you become very strong in your ego, you believe you're the director of the show, and that things that come to you of you, come from you as opposed from God. And the opposite of ego gone too wrong is humility. But then when you bring in kindness, Hesed, the beauty of kindness is it takes you from being about yourself to being about others.
See,
So it seems,
yes, okay. So that's a very good point, Rhonda. I think that it's important to understand. Say Bina is actually, it's about comprehension. Comprehension is not bad. Comprehension is not gone wrong. Comprehension is beautiful. Comprehension gone wrong. Yeah, this is, go. If I'm using my comprehension to figure out how to create a better weapon to hurt somebody, then that could be wrong. I mean, obviously, there's something you have to protect yourself, but all of these are innately holy. Where they can go wrong is where there isn't a sense of the responsibility that comes with the skill. The idea, I mean, for me, Rhonda, look at the world, and people do a lot of kindness. Thank God, we live in a country full of kindness. Someone can do kindness for a selfish reason. Someone can do kindness because of how it looks. Someone can do kindness because it makes them feel good. Someone can do kindness because it puts their name up in lights. What I would say to someone is, first of all, do kindness. And then if you have to worry about about your own ego and spirituality, good. So let's talk about it. But we shouldn't let it impede the actual action. But the idea that kindness, like any of these things, can be infected and overtaken by ego. Every one of them can be overtaken by ego, except for Chochmah. Because Chochmah is not really me. Chochmah is where I'm in receiver mode. So Chochmah is really its germ can be once it's in my head, it could be infected, and I could corrupt my subconscious. But Chochmah in and of itself, that's at least within our souls, that's really where we're recipient mode. Once we become, as we feel ourselves, we become part of the action. Sure, I mean, any of these things can be ego, but Bina itself isn't ego. Bina is comprehension, which is great. Anytime we're studying, we're exercising. We're studying, we're acquiring knowledge. We're thinking about Torah. We're thinking about God. That's all beautiful stuff. If I walk out of there feeling better than my neighbor who didn't study, that's where Bina went off the rails. But if I went out of there just feeling that I have done, recognizing that I've done my job in that moment, those moments of comprehension, I've done my job as a Jew, that I'm trying to understand good things, and I used my brain that God gave me to be able to comprehend, and now I have a certain nugget of understanding I didn't have it before. That's beautiful. There's no arrogance there necessarily, and if there's no arrogance there, then it's just purely holy. Here, so the balance we said is that Bina, like everything else, needs a flavor of Chachma, but it doesn't mean Bina is itself an ego. Make any sense?
Yeah.
All right. So,
Thank you
question?
so much.
Okay, be
Thank you
well.
very much.
Thank you.
Have a good Chodesh. Yeah.
Thank you.